After 28 years, my boss sent me a text when I was on vacation. Don't return again. We found someone better with fresher. It hit me so hard, but I only responded, that's fine. Hope you are ready to lose your position. 2 days later, I woke up to 48 missed calls from my boss. He needed me, but I had already made up my mind. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Simon Dean from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into today's story. The text came in just as they set down the second espresso. I was sitting on the terrace of a quiet hotel cafe in Cascais, Portugal, looking out at the Atlantic like it owed me an apology. I hadn't taken a proper vacation in over a decade. Too many product launches, too many last-minute pitches, too many times I'd been told I was indispensable. I used to believe that. I used to wear it like armor. Now it just felt like a trick someone had pulled while I was too loyal to notice. Don't return. We found someone better. Fresher. No greeting. No punctuation, even. Just that. I stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen without reacting. My reflection in the black glass of the phone looked older than I remembered. Crow's feet, graying temples, a mouth that hadn't really smiled since the product rebrand in 19. I placed the phone face down on the table and took a slow sip of the espresso. Bitter. Burnt. Perfect. It hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not because I didn't see it coming. I did. But because I let them get close enough to do it like this. That's the part that stayed with me. 28 years. I gave them 28 years. I was 24 when I walked into that startup with a beat-up briefcase and a pitch deck that looked like a high school project. I stayed through mergers, lawsuits, mass layoffs, hostile takeovers. I survived 5 CEOs, 6 rebrands, and the digital apocalypse that killed half the industry. And in all that time, I kept showing up. On time. On call. On demand. They didn't even bother with a call. Just a text. A waiter passed by and asked if everything was all right. I nodded, smiled, said I was fine. It was muscle memory, that response. Years of boardroom diplomacy had taught me how to lie without blinking. I picked up the phone and typed my reply slowly, deliberately, like a man carving something into stone. That's fine. Hope you're ready to lose your position. Then I turned it off. Not silent. Not do not disturb. Off. For the rest of that day, I didn't speak to anyone. I walked the cliffside trails until my feet ached and my lungs burned from the sea air. Somewhere between Boca do Inferno and the abandoned lighthouse, I stopped feeling angry. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because anger was something I used to waste on people I thought mattered. They didn't. That night, I lay in the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling for hours, playing a loop of memories I hadn't thought about in years. Not the big wins, but the small humiliations. The way my boss, Elliot, used to call me the old dog with good instincts in front of clients, as if my instincts hadn't rebuilt their entire customer lifecycle model. The way my ideas were always a bit too legacy until someone younger repeated them louder. The meetings I wasn't invited to. The interns who leapfrogged past me because they had sharper haircuts and knew how to use TikTok. They said I didn't evolve, that I was tired, predictable. But the truth was, I never had time to evolve. I was too busy holding the damn place together. I remembered one night, 3 years ago, when Elliot had called me at midnight because a Fortune 100 client was threatening to walk. He sounded drunk. Panicked. I got out of bed, put on a coat, drove an hour into the office, and wrote a 12-slide deck in 90 minutes that saved the contract. No thank you. No bonus. Just a that's what makes you reliable, Mark. And now, just a text. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, as usual. I sat by the window with black coffee and wrote out everything I'd done for that company, every campaign, every crisis fixed, every client I'd brought in. It took me 4 hours. When I finished, I deleted it. I didn't need to prove it to anyone anymore. I just needed to see it for myself, one last time. I wasn't sentimental about the work, but I was sentimental about the time. 28 years of birthdays missed, flights canceled, dinners left cold. Also, I could be reliable. They didn't fire me. They discarded me. There's a difference. Later that day, I received a call from Amelia, an executive I'd brought in 7 years ago. She didn't know yet. Her voice was casual, asking if I could hop on a call next week to prep for the spring client summit. I won't be there, I said. There was a long pause. What do you mean? I've been replaced, I said. Didn't you hear? They found someone fresher. Silence. Then, quietly. You're joking. No. Just disposable. The tone in her voice shifted. Sharpened. Let me call you back. By the time I walked into dinner that night, I had 5 missed calls from other executives. 2 texts from clients I'd personally signed. 1 message that simply said, if you're open to consulting, I'm interested. That's when it hit me. Not what they did, but what they forgot. They forgot the weight of what I carried. They forgot who the clients trusted. They forgot I never signed a non-compete. They forgot I was always quiet, not weak. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sun set across the bay. My phone buzzed again, another message from a CMO I'd mentored. I didn't rush to answer it. For the first time in years, I didn't know anyone urgency. They were the ones who would learn what urgency felt like now. Because the game had already changed, and I wasn't playing for them anymore. I didn't rage. I didn't plead. I didn't respond to the follow-up message that came a few hours after the first one, as if Elliot had second-guessed the tone. It said, let's circle back when you're home. This was a tough decision. No hard feelings. I didn't even open it. Instead, I booked 3 more nights at the hotel. I ordered room service. I walked every morning along the rocky coastline with a fresh notebook in my back pocket, mapping out names, not of enemies, but of allies. People I'd trained. Clients I'd held together when the product failed, when supply chain nightmares choked timelines, when marketing budgets vanished overnight. People who shook my hand and meant it. I didn't send out a press release. I didn't go on LinkedIn and make some sanctimonious post about new beginnings. That's what they expected. A graceful bow out. Something that could be reinterpreted later as mutual. But this wasn't mutual. And I wasn't going to pretend it was. When I landed back in Chicago, I didn't even stop at the office. There was no desk to clean out. No HR meeting. They wanted to erase me like whiteboard ink, quick, efficient, emotionless. So I gave them what they asked for, total absence. 3 days passed without a word from me. On the 4th, the first call came in. Jonas, a longtime CMO from a client that represented over 15% of the company's revenue. I let it ring through. Then the voicemail dropped. Hey, Mark, just heard the news. Not sure what happened, but if you're open to private consulting, we'd rather work directly with you. No hard feelings, just trust. He wasn't the first. By the end of the week, I had 11 similar messages. Some were polite. Some were furious. One simply said, tell me where to wire the retainer. That was the moment I realized they hadn't fired me. They'd amputated their own lifeline. Elliot had always underestimated me because I didn't demand attention. I didn't walk into meetings like I owned the place. I didn't speak unless I had something to say. What he never understood was that I'd been running his company from the middle. Quietly. Efficiently. Like a heart pumping blood while the brain believed it was in charge. And now the pulse was gone. I made 1 phone call that week. Just 1. To Mia, a former intern I'd mentored nearly a decade ago. She'd gone on to become a sharp, agile strategist in her own right. And the last time we spoke, she told me if I ever went solo, she'd follow without hesitation. She picked up on the second ring. You finally did it? No, I said. They did. She was silent for a beat. Then, where do we start? I laughed. Honest, dry, unfamiliar in my own throat. We don't start anything. We strip it down. We met in a coffee shop that had too many Edison bulbs and not enough insulation. I slid a legal pad across the table. It wasn't a business plan. It was a map. Client names. Contract dates. Weak points in the old company's service model. Not sabotage, just observation. Mia read it all in silence, eyes narrowing like she was seeing the whole battlefield at once. You realize they'll come crawling back, she said. The second they noticed the drop. I nodded. Let them. I won't be there to answer. We formed an LLC within 48 hours. Quiet. Minimal. No announcement. We registered a domain using my initials, built a single-page website with no photos, just credibility. The tagline read, built on relationships. Delivered with clarity. Clients started calling us. Not out of spite, but out of need. They trusted me. My voice. My strategy. I'd been their constant when the industry shifted under their feet. The moment they found out I was free, they moved like soldiers toward a better general. The old company didn't notice at first. They were still celebrating my departure, spinning it as an evolution of leadership, as if they'd graduated beyond me. But when two of our largest clients pulled their renewals, Elliot called. I didn't pick up. Then came the email. Let's talk. I think we moved too fast. There's room for negotiation. I archived it. I spent the next week rebuilding, not my career, but my identity. I removed the company logo from my old laptop, threw out the branded mugs, scrubbed every trace of them from my home office. I wasn't mourning. I was detoxing. I remembered a moment, years ago, when Elliot told me, "You're the kind of guy who holds the fort." He meant it as praise, but it was a leash. The kind of compliment you give to someone you don't plan to promote. He was right about one thing, though. I did hold the fort, but now I was burning it down without lifting a match. By week's end, we'd converted 5 clients. Not because I offered a discount, not because I made a pitch, but because I'd earned their belief over years of invisible effort. I wasn't a brand. I was a known quantity. And in this business, known beats new every single time. On Sunday night, I sat in my apartment, lights low, jazz humming faintly in the background. My inbox pinged. Another old client. Another request for consultation. I leaned back, eyes closed, remembering the last time I'd truly felt in control. Maybe never. Until now. I wasn't building a new company. I was building a legacy, one project at a time. No middlemen. No executives siphoning credit. Just me, delivering what I always had, without apology. The vanishing wasn't a retreat. It was an extraction. And by the time they realized I was gone, I'd already become something they couldn't replicate. There's a strange quiet that comes after betrayal. Not relief. Not grief. Something colder. Like a house that's been emptied out too fast, photos still hanging, drawers left open, a half-drunk glass on the counter. That's how my life felt the week after the company let me go. Not wrecked. Just hollow. Like everything inside me had already packed up and left years ago, and I'd only just noticed. I stopped sleeping through the night. My body still woke up at 5:40 a.m., trained by years of morning meetings and last-minute fires. But now there was nothing to wake up for. No calendar blocks. No status updates. Just silence. I didn't fight it. I made black coffee in the dark, stood by the window, and watched the city turn its lights on. The quiet hours became mine again. Sacred. Sharp. Like a knife I'd left in a drawer and forgotten how it gleamed. The third morning back, I found myself sitting in front of an old storage box I hadn't opened in years. It lived in the back of my hall closet, under a collapsed umbrella and a winter coat I hadn't worn since the merger. Inside, 2 branded notebooks, a dusty whiskey tumbler from a long-forgotten client retreat, 5 thank-you cards from executives who were all laid off, and a pile of name tags from conferences I couldn't remember attending. Buried underneath it all was a plaque. Mark Elwood, Strategic Excellence, 2011. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was proud of it, but because I remembered the meeting that followed the award. Elliot pulled me aside and said, "Don't let it go to your head. You're only as good as your last quarter." Then he smiled like it was a joke, but I saw it in his eyes. He meant it. That was the thing with Elliot. He weaponized compliments. Gave just enough to keep you moving, never enough to let you arrive. There were more memories like that. Small, forgettable moments that suddenly took on weight. I remembered the product pitch in 17 where my deck was used, but my name was scrubbed. I remembered the email thread where I built a crisis response plan overnight, and Elliot replied to the group, "Thanks, team, strong effort." I remembered the Christmas party where I stood alone for 20 minutes while junior staff toasted a VP who'd been there 6 months. None of it broke me at the time. I told myself I didn't need the spotlight. That real value wasn't loud. That my work spoke for itself. But looking back now, I realized the work hadn't been speaking for me. It had been speaking through me, for other people, for their promotions, for their praise. I was the scaffolding, and they'd already built something shiny on top of me. That night, I opened my laptop and started writing, not emails, not business plans. Just truth. I wrote down everything I had swallowed over the years. The ideas stolen. The sacrifices ignored. The weekends erased. The gut instincts that saved products, launches, reputations. I wrote until my fingers ached. Not to vent, to remember. Because if I didn't put it down in black and white, I'd let myself forget again. I'd start romanticizing what they took from me. This was my scar tissue, and I needed to trace every line of it before I could move forward. The next morning, Mia sent me a text. Another client signed. High margin. Minimal lift. I'll forward the scope. I read it twice and nodded to myself. The consultancy was real now. It wasn't just a reaction, it was a replacement. Not of the company, of who I used to be. The man who lowered his head. The man who let reliable become his prison. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking past the old office building. It wasn't planned. My feet just took me there, like muscle memory. The glass exterior shimmered under the spring sun, clean and polished like it was trying to forget all the people it had chewed through. I stood across the street and watched employees come and go. New faces. Fast faces. Everyone glued to their phones. No one noticing the man who built half their revenue stream standing in the shadows. I didn't feel resentment. I felt distance. The kind of distance that can't be undone. Elliot had once told me, you don't have to be seen to be respected. I believed him. For years, I thought humility would eventually earn me a seat at the table. But what he really meant was, stay invisible so I don't have to compete with you. That's what the company thrived on, unseen labor. People like me who did the work while someone else shook the hands and smiled for the cameras. I wasn't mad about it anymore. I was done being mad. Anger is a leash, too. No, I wasn't mad. I was clear. I walked home that day without looking back. At the apartment, I took down the framed photo from the office Christmas party in 2009. It used to hang near the front door. I replaced it with the screenshot of Elliot's missed calls. 48. That number had become something sacred, not out of spite, out of proof. That even a man like him, arrogant, insulated, powerful, could panic. That even he could feel the chill of being left out in the cold. He thought I was a lifer, that I'd keep coming back no matter how many times he clipped my wings. But he never asked himself what would happen if I didn't. If I walked away on purpose. If I turned my silence into strategy. That night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of bourbon and a single thought running on repeat. They didn't fire me. They freed me. And now, I was going to make every second of that freedom count. The shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with the small things, the kinds of things only people who pay attention notice. A former client tagged me in a post on LinkedIn. Real strategy has a name. And I'm glad we found ours again. No mention of the company. No shade. Just a subtle shot across the bow. 3 hours later, I had 4 DMs in my inbox, all from directors I hadn't spoken to in months. One even wrote, I didn't realize you were consulting now. We've missed your brain. It was almost funny. For years, I've been told not to make myself too visible. That I was more valuable as the quiet one. The one who could step in without overshadowing leadership. Now, the very thing they tried to mute in me, my presence, my clarity, was the reason people were reaching out. The return wasn't about coming back louder. It was about coming back undeniable. Mia and I rented a small office space in River North. Just 2 rooms. Concrete floors. A single window that overlooked an alley where a dumpster war seemed to be unfolding between 2 rival restaurants. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't glossy. But it was ours. We didn't waste time with branding guides or merchandise or some performative launch campaign. We built systems. We built service tiers. We streamlined intake forms. We outlined every single thing the old company did slowly and found ways to do it faster, better, with less overhead. We didn't have investors. We didn't have departments. But we had something they'd lost a long time ago, trust. Clients didn't just call, they confided. They spoke to me like I was still on the inside. They asked what really happened. I never badmouthed Elliot or the company. I didn't need to. My silence did more damage than any statement ever could. People don't follow revenge. They follow certainty. And I had never been more certain of my value. One Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Julian. An executive at a brand I helped turn around 6 years ago. He was breathless. Not dramatic, just anxious. He said the new guy, the fresher replacement they brought in, had pitched a campaign with AI-generated slogans and a 12-second jingle that sounded like an energy drink commercial. He used the word derivative 5 times in 2 minutes. We can't use this, Julian said. It's tone deaf. Our board is already on edge. So pull it, I said. There was a pause. You think we can? You're the client, I said. They work for you, not the other way around. It was like he'd forgotten. That's what happens when the relationship gets inverted. The vendor becomes the authority, and the client becomes the appeaser. Elliot's whole company had evolved into a cult of ego, splashy decks, buzzwords, and no spine. What we were offering now wasn't just consultancy. It was sanity. Julian hired us that night. By the end of the week, we had contracts signed with 3 brands that used to make up 40% of the old firm's annual revenue. Not a word from Elliot. Not yet. But I felt him. Like a heat behind the door. Like pressure building behind a dam. Mia watched the numbers roll in on our second Friday. You know we're profitable already, right? She said. I nodded. We're not a startup. We're a correction. She laughed, quiet, dry. They're going to panic. They already are, I said. That weekend, I updated our intake form to include a simple question. Have you previously worked with Mark in another capacity? Almost every box came back checked. Yes. It wasn't just a lead funnel. It was a reckoning. A trail of evidence. All the people they thought they owned, they were never the companies to begin with. They were mine. Not contractually. Not legally. But relationally. Emotionally. Strategically. That's what Elliot forgot. That's what everyone forgets when they play chess with human capital. You can't trademark trust. You can't file a patent on instinct. And if you discard a man without understanding what he's made of, you're not just losing an employee. You're bleeding the architecture of your own empire. On Sunday night, I opened my inbox and saw something unexpected, a message from Tyler. He was young, sharp, one of the only people from the old team I respected. We hadn't spoken since the transition. His email was short. Mark, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't know how it went down until last week. It wasn't right. If there's ever room for someone who still gives a damn, I'd rather be building with you than watching things fall apart over here. Respectfully, T. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I flagged it. Not for ego. For timing. The return wasn't just about reclaiming space. It was about choosing intentionally what came with me into this new chapter. Tyler had potential. But potential wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't building a haven. I was building a fortress. And only the loyal would be allowed in. At midnight, I got a new text. This one from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. We should talk. I think there's a way we can course correct this before it goes too far. Elliot. I stared at the message. No punctuation. Still the same man, still pretending control. He hadn't figured it out yet. It already went too far. And I wasn't returning. I was replacing. The first time I noticed the missed calls, I thought my phone was glitching. I'd silenced notifications weeks ago. Not out of pride, out of discipline. I didn't want temptation. No quick checking old emails. No peeking into systems I no longer belonged to. I'd made my exit surgical. Clean. But on that Thursday morning, as I rebooted my phone to test a client app, the red flood appeared across the lock screen. 48 missed calls. 18 voicemails. 7 texts. All from Elliot. I stood in the middle of my new office and let the screen burn into my vision. The silence of the room made the notification sound deafening, even though I hadn't turned the ringer back on. Each number was like a crack in the glass, desperate attempts to pull me back into a conversation I'd already finished. Mia walked in a few minutes later and stopped short when she saw my face. What is it? I turned the screen toward her. Her eyebrows rose, but she didn't smile. So the avalanche begins. I didn't say anything. I was still staring at the screen, not with satisfaction, but with confirmation. This wasn't revenge. Not really. This was physics. Cause and effect. They dropped me. The system failed. And now gravity was having its say. I listened to the first voicemail on speaker. Mark, listen, I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk. I think we moved too fast. There's been some complications. A lot of movement. I think it'd be smart to sit down and reset expectations. You and I both know the clients weren't reacting to you, per se. It's just transition shock. Let's be adults and have a conversation. There was something remarkable about hearing a man still trying to lead a conversation he no longer owned. He spoke like the boss I no longer reported to. He even softened the edges with business phrases, reset expectations, transition shock. As if this were a reorg. As if it wasn't betrayal with a coward's face. The second voicemail was shorter. Clipped. Mark, this is getting out of hand. You're making a point. It's been made. But this is not the way. You're damaging relationships. Be reasonable. I turned off the phone and set it on the windowsill, screen down. That word, reasonable. That's what they always used when someone stopped playing the fool. Be reasonable, Mark. Be flexible. Be strategic. Be patient. They dressed it up 100 ways over the years. But it always meant the same thing. Don't make this harder for us. I walked to the whiteboard and erased the week's priorities. Wrote one word in the center, fireproof. New goal, I said. By the end of this quarter, I want us untouchable. No dependencies. No vulnerabilities. No exposure to their systems, their suppliers, or their influence. Mia nodded without asking questions. That's what I liked about her. No drama, no pity, just movement. We got to work. By the end of the week, we'd migrated every client onto our proprietary framework. We removed third-party platforms the old company had built. We repackaged deliverables so they couldn't be compared side by side. The clients didn't just sign. They thanked us. They said things like, "It finally feels like someone's thinking long-term again." Like I hadn't been doing that all along. That weekend, I sat on my balcony with a bottle of bourbon and my feet up on the ledge. The city below hummed with Friday energy, people moving, laughing, posturing. I remembered how many nights I'd given up to be someone else's backbone. The birthdays missed. The dinners rescheduled. The hollow sacrifices. And now, here I was, unemployed on paper, but more powerful than I'd ever been. I opened my phone and scrolled through the rest of Elliot's messages. The third one was a masterpiece in denial. Let's discuss a potential advisory role. You'd retain your client contacts, flexible hours, premium compensation. I'm prepared to offer terms you'll be happy with. No apology. Just bait. The fourth one. I spoke to Jonas. He's willing to reconsider if you come back under the company umbrella. I can frame it as a strategic return. That one made me laugh. The fifth one. Mark, this is your last chance to make things right. That was when I realized something. The messages weren't escalating in clarity. They were unraveling in tone. Elliot had shifted from rational to performative, to anxious, to entitled. He wasn't trying to fix the situation. He was trying to reclaim control. And it was killing him that I wasn't playing. I took a screenshot of the missed calls list, just the number, the name, the timestamp trail of failure. I printed it, framed it, hung it on the wall beside my desk. I didn't do it to gloat. I did it to remember. Because sometimes survival looks like victory, but it's really just delay. You have to name the moment the power shifted. You have to honor it. Otherwise, you start to forget what it cost you to stay quiet for so long. The next morning, Tyler, the junior executive who'd sent that apology weeks ago, showed up at the new office. Unannounced. Holding a coffee tray with 2 cups and a handwritten note. "I don't want anything," he said. "Just figured you'd be dealing with fallout." I looked at him for a long second, then opened the door. He sat across from me, younger than I remembered, but with a steadiness in his eyes. Like something inside him had broken too. "I think they're about to implode," he said. I nodded. "They already have. You just haven't seen the headlines yet." He sipped his coffee and looked around our stripped-down space. "Doesn't look like much." I smiled. "That's the point. No polish. No stage lighting. Just substance." He left without pitching himself. Just said, "If you ever need another pair of hands, real hands, I'm around." I respected that. When he left, I sat back in my chair, the sun creeping across the floor in long, slow strips. And for the first time in months, I felt something unexpected. Not vengeance. Not pride. Peace. Because the confrontation wasn't a phone call. It wasn't a showdown. It was this, not answering. Letting the silence answer for me. I didn't watch the company collapse. Not directly. Not obsessively. I wasn't sitting in front of a screen refreshing stock tickers or hunting for gossip on Slack leaks. That's not how it works when you've truly moved on. When you've already buried the thing they're just now realizing is dying. But pieces of it reached me, anyway. They always do. It started with the smallest shift. An article buried in a trade newsletter, one of those morning roundups people skim on their way to meetings. Legacy firm struggles with post-leadership transition as major clients walk. No names mentioned, just whispers. A slow pulse of discomfort, the kind that makes investors nervous. By the following week, the whispers had grown teeth. I heard from a friend at a media agency that the new hire, the fresher one they'd replaced me with, had been moved out of public-facing accounts. Something about brand misalignment. Internally, they were calling it a creative gap. Externally, they said nothing. Then came the real sign. Amelia reached out. She never called. Never needed to. She was sharp, high up, and utterly self-reliant. When I saw her name light up my phone, I answered immediately. "Mark," she said, no preamble. "They've completely lost the handle." "What happened?" "You happened," she said. "They thought they were replacing a title. They didn't realize they were replacing trust. And they can't fake it. The clients feel it. The board feels it. Everyone's trying to pretend it's a bump. But it's not. It's a pattern," she said. "And you were the one holding it together." I let the silence sit. Let her feel it if she wanted. She didn't. "I'm not calling to recruit you back," she said after a moment. "I know that ship's gone. I just wanted you to know. We're seeing it. And we know why it's happening." I didn't ask what we meant. She ended the call quietly, respectfully. No ask. No apology. Just awareness. That was the first real crack. The second came in the form of a resignation. Kara, their last real rainmaker in client services. We'd worked together for 12 years. She posted her departure on LinkedIn with a caption that simply read, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than strategy decks." A few hours later, she followed our consultancy's page. No message. Just alignment. That week, our inquiries doubled. It wasn't just the clients I'd personally worked with. It was people who had heard about how I worked. People who'd been in the rooms I held together, even if they never saw me do it. Word travels fast when silence surrounds it. When you don't campaign. When you don't defend yourself. I had become the story they were telling themselves when the lights flickered. And Elliot? I didn't hear from him again directly, but his panic started to manifest in ways only someone like me would notice. Sudden job postings for senior strategy roles. A ghostwritten article from him on embracing generational transition that read like a defensive PR move. And then, eventually, the most predictable maneuver of all, the rebrand. They changed the name, updated the logo, dropped group from their corporate identity like that would reset the past. It didn't. Because the clients didn't care about the colors. They cared about the consistency, the follow-through. The person who remembered their daughter's name after a bad quarter. The one who called before the fire started, not after it burned half the plan. And now that person was gone. Every week, someone else pulled out. Quietly, like a tooth rotting from the inside. Some shifted to us. Some went to competitors. But they all moved for the same reason. Stability had left the building. And the building still didn't realize it. Mia and I stopped celebrating the wins. Not because we weren't grateful, but because it no longer felt like victory. It felt like inevitability. "Do you think they'll survive?" she asked me one night, long after hours, as we finished mapping out a strategy package for a new global brand. "Companies don't die from one wound," I said. "They die from rot. And rot takes time." She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Feels like they're speeding it up. They always do when they can't admit they need to change." She tilted her head. "And you?" "I already changed," I said. I think that's when she understood. This wasn't about watching them fail anymore. It was about building something clean. Something that didn't require me to shrink. Something that didn't punish me for not shouting. Something where clarity was valued more than noise. The fallout wasn't about them losing everything. It was about them realizing what they never really had. Not loyalty, not culture, not legacy. Just leverage. And that only lasts until the people you're leaning on decide they're done holding the weight. I went home that night and opened my personal journal, the one I kept offline, never shared. I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. They thought I was an employee. I was the foundation. I slept 8 hours that night for the first time in years. Not because the war was over, but because I was no longer in it. The first headline hit on a Monday morning. It was buried 3 layers deep in a trade publication, the kind of article you'd only find if you knew where to look. The title was diplomatic, almost kind. Leadership turbulence following client departures at legacy marketing firm. No names. No firm blame. But it was enough. Enough to signal blood in the water. By noon, it had been reposted 6 times. By 5, someone on Twitter had made a meme out of their new logo crumbling like wet paper. I didn't feel anything at first. No rush. No satisfaction. Just confirmation. Mia forwarded me the link. "It's starting," she wrote. But it had already started. The unraveling isn't a single event. It's slow. It's subtle. It begins with late replies and ends with security escorting someone out of the building. Somewhere in between, there are whispers, contingency plans, revised roadmaps. But the spiral, the real spiral, starts with shame. And shame, in men like Elliot, always looks like performance. That week, he published a video on LinkedIn. It was shot in what looked like a co-working space dressed up to look like a headquarters, staged bookshelves, a firm that had seen better days, a carefully unbuttoned collar. The caption read, "Leadership is not about control. It's about courage." I watched it once. His voice was calm, but you could see it in the way he blinked too slow, like he was choosing his words from a distance. He talked about how transitions bring opportunity and how the landscape is changing faster than ever. He referenced legacy systems and emerging voices. It was all packaged perfectly, all on message. And none of it meant a thing, because he wasn't talking to the public. He was talking to the board, trying to survive, trying to reframe the story before it consumed him. But the timing was wrong. Too much silence had passed. Too many calls had gone unanswered. Too many people had already told their own version of the truth. Not loudly, but consistently. Enough that by the time Elliot opened his mouth, no one was listening anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But Tyler did. He forwarded me a company-wide email that had gone out after the video. Internal memo. Top-down panic. "We want to assure everyone that leadership is fully aligned on our strategic priorities. We acknowledge the unexpected client shifts and are actively reviewing ways to rebuild trust." Rebuild trust. Like it was a deck they could rework. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. Chicago was soft in the spring, those brief weeks before the humidity kicked in. I watched a woman walk her dog down the street. A teenager running for a bus. Someone laughing into their phone. None of them knew a man was losing his empire just a few blocks away. That's the thing about collapse. It's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It's just there, in the background, like a power outage that hasn't reached your block yet. On Thursday, Mia came into the office with a strange look on her face. She set down her bag slowly. "He came here," she said. I looked up. "Who?" "Elliot. 15 minutes ago." I pulled in behind him. He was standing at the door, asking the front desk if you were in. I stood. "Did he get in?" She shook her head. "No, but he tried." I walked to the security monitor and pulled the footage. There he was, gray blazer, hands in pockets, trying to look casual. But his body gave him away. Shoulders too tight. Feet shifting. Eyes darting toward the elevator every few seconds. He wasn't here for a conversation. He was here for a chance. To reclaim the narrative. To pitch some version of partnership. Or at the very least, to pretend this wasn't what it looked like. A man undone by his own arrogance. He stood at the glass for almost 7 minutes. Then he turned and left. I watched every second. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. Because that's what this always was. Not vengeance. Not a reckoning. Just a slow transfer of weight. From false authority back to earned value. Elliot used to be the man who filled rooms with presence. He could control a meeting with a glance, spin a crisis with 2 sentences, and a laugh. But now, in that video, on that sidewalk, he looked like what he always was underneath, replaceable. Just like he said I was. Tyler walked in as the footage looped again. "He asked for you by name," he said. Of course he did. He said he could still fix this. I looked at him. "What did you say?" I told him there was nothing left to fix. That night, I left the office later than usual. The streets were slick with rain, but I didn't rush. I took the long way home, past the old building. Lights were still on inside. Too many for a Thursday night. Probably a meeting. Probably about him. I stood across the street, just for a moment. Not nostalgic. Just still. That building had once made me small. Not by force, but by neglect. By letting me pour myself into it and then pretending I was never there. Now it was flickering, hollow, desperate to rebrand its way into relevance. And I was already gone. Not just from the payroll, from the story. Closure isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with an audience or a crescendo. No slow claps. No last-minute apologies wrapped in epiphanies. It just arrives. Quietly. Like a door closing in the next room that you suddenly realize you'll never walk through again. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the date. The sky was overcast. The coffee was bitter. I'd been up since 5, finalizing a strategy for a new European client. It was the kind of morning that used to blur into hundreds of others, until now. Tyler came in just after 9, holding a plain envelope. "Courier dropped this off," he said. "No return address. No name. Just wait." I knew what it was before I opened it. Inside, a final letter from Elliot. A printed one. Formal, stiff, as if he could still reach me through paper. The header had been stripped of logos. He wasn't writing as a CEO anymore. Just a man trying to stay relevant in a narrative that had outpaced him. The letter didn't start with an apology. It started with a recollection. He told me about the first pitch we ever worked on together. The startup with the ridiculous tagline and the founder who demanded we sit in silence for 3 minutes before each meeting. I remembered it. We'd laughed about it then. Now it felt distant, like something that happened to a different man. Then came the admission, buried halfway down the page. "I underestimated your role in what we built. I mistook your quiet for complacency. That was my failure. And I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no ask. No olive branch. Just that. An apology 10 years too late, on paper, when it couldn't save him anymore. I folded the letter once, carefully, and set it aside. Not out of respect. Out of ritual. There's a kind of peace that comes when the apology no longer matters. When you've already forgiven someone, not for them, but because carrying the weight would slow you down. I didn't need Elliot's regret. I didn't need his name in my mouth anymore. He was no longer the villain in my story. He was just an ending. That afternoon, I walked home instead of driving. Took the long route through the Riverwalk, the air sharp and gray around me. The city moved like it always had, fast, loud, and different. But I was different. I wasn't walking into meetings anymore. I wasn't racing against deadlines someone else created. I was moving under my own gravity now. At home, I opened a drawer in my closet I hadn't touched since the week I left. Inside was a single cardboard box. My last keepsake. The company ID. A branded pen set. The whiskey tumbler from the client trip. My old badge, still clipped to a lanyard that smelled faintly of cologne and exhaustion. I held it for a second, thumbed the worn plastic edge. Not with longing. With clarity. This had been my tether for 28 years. Not anymore. I took the box to the fireplace and lit a match. One by one, I fed the items into the flames. Not in anger. In release. I watched the badge curl into blackened plastic, the lanyard twist and disintegrate. The pin cracked with a soft pop, the logo melting into nothing. I waited until the last ember died, then closed the grate. No photos. No posts. Just fire and silence. Later that evening, Mia and I met at a small restaurant tucked into a quiet street corner. One of those places with no sign out front, just a candle in the window and a menu that changed daily. We didn't talk business. We didn't need to. The work was strong. Clients were steady. We'd made something lean, agile, real. "I still think about it sometimes," she said over a glass of red wine. "What they threw away." "They didn't throw me away," I said. "They set me down. And I just didn't pick it back up." She nodded. "Still, you could have taken them apart. Publicly. Called names. Posted receipts." I took a sip of wine. "Let it settle." "That's not closure," I said. "That's just noise." She smiled. "You always were a quiet executioner." I laughed, this time fully. Freely. The kind of laugh that doesn't pull from pain. We raised our glasses. Not to revenge. Not even to success. To distance. To self-respect. To beginning again without asking permission. When I got home, there was a package at the door. No label. Just a return address from a former client in London. Inside, a leather notebook and a short note in handwriting I recognized immediately. "You built things other people took credit for. Now build something no one else can touch." I ran my fingers across the cover. Then I opened to the first page and wrote, Chapter 1. Mine. No one was watching. No one needed to. This story didn't need an audience anymore. It had an author. If this story hits something deep, if you've ever been underestimated, discarded, or told you were replaceable, prove them wrong. Drop a comment. Share it with someone who needs that reminder. Hit like and subscribe if you're tired of noise and want more truth, more fire, more earned endings. This is just the beginning. See you soon in our next story.